Every night, a poor girl slept alone on a park bench, until a millionaire finds her during a walk with his dog. When he discovered the reason behind the scene, he was overcome by a pain he had never felt before, and for the first time in his life, that cold man begins to cry. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a collection of stars that had fallen to Earth, permanently frozen in geometric perfection. From the 53rd floor of the Harrison Tower, William Harrison observed the city below with cold detachment. At 42, he had conquered New York's ruthless real estate market with the same methodical precision he applied to every aspect of his life. "Duke," he called, and the chocolate Labrador padded across the polished marble floor to his side. Will's hand found the dog's head automatically, scratching behind the ears in the exact spot that made Duke's tail wag. The dog was the only living being that received any genuine affection from Will Harrison. The penthouse that crowned his flagship building was a testament to wealth and architectural brilliance, 20,000 square feet of minimalist luxury that architectural magazines had featured countless times. Yet for all its grandeur, it felt more like a museum than a home. No family photos adorned the walls, no evidence of human connection or sentiment anywhere. Just carefully curated art pieces worth more than what most people earned in a lifetime. Will's phone buzzed. His executive assistant, Jennifer, was texting about tomorrow's acquisition meeting. He responded with precise instructions, then set the phone down on the Italian marble countertop. The silence that followed was absolute, save for Duke's breathing and the faint hum of the climate control system. His evening routine never varied: review financial reports until 9 p.m., then walk Duke in Central Park despite his security team's objections, shower at 10:30 and be in bed by 11. Consistency and control, these were the principles that had built his empire. "Time for our walk," Will announced to Duke, who immediately perked up, tail wagging enthusiastically. The dog's excitement was the closest thing to joy that ever entered the penthouse. Downstairs, Richard, his driver and head of security, waited with the car. "Good evening, Mr. Harrison. The usual route tonight?" "Yes," Will replied, sliding into the back seat with Duke. He didn't need to elaborate. After 5 years, Richard knew exactly where to go and that his employer preferred silence during the ride. Central Park after dark was technically off-limits, but rules didn't apply to men like William Harrison. A substantial annual donation to the right department ensured his nightly walks remained undisturbed. He preferred the park this way, empty, quiet, his. The path near Bethesda Fountain was his favorite, especially in autumn, when the leaves crunched satisfyingly beneath his Italian leather shoes. "Wait here," he instructed Richard, who nodded reluctantly. Duke bounded ahead, his leash trailing behind him, a symbolic gesture more than a necessity. The dog was impeccably trained and would return at the slightest whistle. The October air carried a bite that promised a harsh winter ahead. Will tightened the belt of his cashmere coat and continued along the path, watching Duke explore with enviable enthusiasm. These walks were the only time Will allowed himself to think about nothing in particular: no deals, no acquisitions, no competitors to outmaneuver. As they approached the Bethesda terrace, Duke suddenly stopped, ears perked forward. Then, unexpectedly, the dog darted off toward the fountain. "Duke!" Will called, his voice echoing in the empty park. Annoyed, he followed the path around the terrace. When he caught up, he found Duke sitting attentively beside one of the benches, their tail wagging slowly. Will was about to scold the dog when he noticed what had captured Duke's attention. A small figure was curled up on the bench, partially covered by what looked like a thin jacket. For a moment, he thought it might be a homeless person, until the figure shifted and in the dim light of the park lamps, he saw the face of a young girl. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old. Her brown hair was tangled, and her clothes, though not exactly ragged, were certainly worn. What struck Will most was that despite being obviously cold, she had positioned herself with a certain dignity, her small backpack serving as a pillow. Duke whined softly, nudging the girl's dangling hand with his nose. To Will's surprise, she stirred at the touch, her eyes fluttering open without any trace of fear, just weariness beyond her years. "Hello, doggy," she murmured, offering Duke a small smile as she reached out to pet him. Duke, normally aloof with strangers, leaned into her touch like they were old friends. Will stood frozen, utterly unprepared for this situation. His instinct was to call park security or perhaps the police, but something about the girl's calm demeanor gave him pause. "What
are you doing here?" he
asked, his voice sharper than intended. "It's nearly 10 o'clock at night. Where are your parents?" The girl sat up slowly, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "My mum said to wait here. She had to go somewhere important, but promised she'd be right. Back?" Her voice was clear and articulate, devoid of the whine one might expect from a child. "When was this?" She considered the question with surprising seriousness. 5 days ago, I think, maybe 6. The days kind of blend together. Will felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest, an uncomfortable tightness he couldn't name. "You've been here for 5 days? Alone?" She nodded, then added with a hint of pride, "I've been very careful. I only use the public bathroom during the day when there are lots of people around, and I still have some of the granola bars Mum left me." She patted her small backpack. "What's your name?" Will asked, finding himself sitting down on the bench beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "Olivia," she replied, continuing to stroke Duke, who had now placed his head on her lap. "But everyone calls me Liv. What's your dog's name?" "Duke." "He's beautiful," she said with such genuine admiration that Will found himself unexpectedly touched. "He looks just like the dog in my favorite book." "Where do you live, Olivia?" Will pressed, trying to make sense of the situation. She shrugged. "Different places. Mom and I move around a lot. We were staying at Ms. Peterson's place, but then Mom said we needed to wait here because she had a new job opportunity." She looked up at him with eyes that seemed too knowing for her age. "Are you going to call the police?" The question caught Will off guard. "Should I?" "Mom says we should. Avoid them because they might separate us. She says the system doesn't understand our situation." Olivia's fingers twisted anxiously in Duke's fur. "She promised she'd come back. She always comes back." But not for 5 days, Will thought. Never for 5 days. The rational part of his brain, the part that had built a billion-dollar empire, was already calculating the proper course of action. Call the authorities, let them handle it, continue his walk, forget the encounter by morning. But Duke had settled his considerable weight against the girl's legs, looking more content than Will had seen him in months. And something about Olivia's quiet dignity, the absence of tears or tantrums, struck a chord in him he hadn't known existed. "Are you hungry?" he heard himself ask. Olivia hesitated, then nodded slightly. "A little. I've been saving my last granola bar for tomorrow." Will stood up, surprising himself with his next words. "I have food at my home, and it's getting too cold to stay out here. You could come with me just for tonight. We can try to find your mother in the morning." The offer hung in the air between them, as unexpected to him as it must have been to her. In the 17 years since founding Harrison Properties, Will had never once brought a visitor to his penthouse. Not family, what little he had, not friends, none to speak of, not even the occasional women he dated briefly before. Losing interest. Olivia studied him with a gaze so assessing it made him uncomfortable. Then she looked at Duke, who wagged his tail as if vouching for his master. "Okay," she finally said, gathering her small backpack. "But just for tonight. Mom will be worried if she comes back and I'm not here." As they walked back toward the C park entrance, Duke stayed close to Olivia's side, occasionally looking up at the girl as if to ensure she was still there. Will found himself walking more slowly than usual, adjusting his stride to accommodate her shorter legs. Richard's face, when Will approached the car with a child in tow, registered a shock so profound it almost broke through his professional composure. "Mr. Harrison?" he questioned, eyes darting between his employer and the small girl. "This is Olivia," Will said, as if bringing stray children home was something he did regularly. "She'll be staying with us tonight." As Richard opened the car door, Will noticed Olivia hesitate. "It's all right," he said, attempting a reassuring tone that felt foreign on his tongue. "You'll be safe." She climbed in, Duke following immediately to sit beside her rather than in his usual place next to Will. As the car pulled away from the curb, Will caught sight of Olivia's reflection in the window. She was staring back at the park with an expression of worried hope that made that strange tightness return to his chest. For the first time in years, William Harrison's carefully constructed routine had been disrupted. And for reasons he couldn't yet comprehend, he had allowed it to happen. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent. Olivia stood perfectly still, one hand clutching her backpack strap, the other buried in Duke's fur. Will watched her reflection in the polished brass doors, noting how she maintained a carefully measured distance from him. Not scared exactly, but cautious, like a small wild animal accustomed to sudden movements from larger predators. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, revealing the sprawling expanse of Will's home. He expected some reaction, or at least curiosity, but Olivia merely took in her surroundings with the same quiet assessment she'd shown at the park. "Are you a king?" she finally asked, her voice matter-of-fact. The question caught Will off guard. "What? No." "Oh." She nodded thoughtfully. "You just live like one." Will found himself unexpectedly self-conscious about his home, the clinical perfection of it, the absence of warmth. He led her through the main living area toward the kitchen. "You can sit there," he said, gesturing to one of the bar stools. "Add the kitchen island. I'll make you something to eat." Olivia climbed onto the stool, placing her backpack carefully on the counter. Duke settled at her feet, as if he'd been guarding small girls his entire life. Will opened the refrigerator, suddenly aware of how ill-equipped he was for feeding a child. His private chef prepared his meals for the week, but everything was portioned for a single adult with specific nutritional requirements. Nothing a 9-year-old would find appealing. "Is pasta okay?" he asked, finding a container of linguine with clam sauce. "I don't like clams," Olivia replied, watching him carefully. "Do you have peanut butter? I could make a sandwich." "You don't need to make your own food," Will said, feeling strangely defensive. "I can make you a sandwich." Olivia shrugged. "Mom says I should know how to take care of myself." The comment hung in the air, heavy with implications Will wasn't prepared to address. He located bread, peanut butter, and jelly in his pantry, items his housekeeper must have purchased at some point. As he assembled the sandwich with the same precision, he applied to contract negotiations. He could feel Olivia's eyes tracking his movements. "Cut it diagonally," she suggested. "Hair tastes better that way." Will complied, inexplicably pleased when his efforts earned a small nod of approval. He placed the plate in front of her along with a glass of milk he'd found in the refrigerator. "Thank you," she said politely, taking a careful bite. Her manners were impeccable, unexpected in a child who'd been sleeping on a park bench. Will leaned against the counter, unsure what to do next. His interactions with children were limited to brief, awkward exchanges at charity, events his PR team insisted he attend. He'd never spent more than 5 minutes alone with a child, let alone invited one into his home. "Your mum," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Why did she leave you in the park?" Olivia chewed slowly before answering. "She had a job interview. A really important one. She said it might change everything for us." She took a sip of milk. "Sometimes she has to go places where kids aren't allowed, but she always comes back." "But 5 days is a long time," Will pressed. "She's never been gone this long before," Olivia admitted, a brief crack in her composure revealing something vulnerable underneath. She quickly recovered. "But she must have a good reason. Mom always has a plan." Will nodded, not wanting to voice his growing suspicion that Olivia had been abandoned. "Tomorrow we should try to find her. Do you know her full name? Where she works? Any friends she might be staying with?" "Rebecca Taylor," Olivia said, "but everyone calls her Becky. She works lots of different jobs. Last month she was cleaning at a hotel, but they let her go." She frowned, trying to remember. She was excited about this new job. Something about construction. A piece of the sandwich crust dropped to the floor and Duke immediately captured it. Olivia giggled. The first childlike sound Will had heard from her. The sound was unexpectedly pleasant. You should finish eating, and then you need to get cleaned up, Will said, suddenly remembering basic childcare necessities. You can use the guest bathroom. I'll find you something to sleep in. After Olivia finished her sandwich, Will led her to one of the 5 guest bedrooms that had never hosted an actual guest. The room was decorated in shades of grey and blue, with an abstract painting that had cost more than a mid-sized sedan hanging over the king-sized bed. The bathroom is through there, he said, pointing to a door. There should be towels and whatever else you need. Olivia looked around the room, then up at Will. Do you have a t-shirt I could borrow for sleeping? Will nodded, relieved to have a concrete task. I'll find something. While Olivia was in the bathroom, Will called Jennifer, waking her despite the late hour. I need you to hire a private investigator, he said without preamble. The best one you can find. I need them here at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Is everything all right, Mr. Harrison? Jennifer asked, concern evident in her voice. Everything's fine. Just do it. He hung up before she could ask further questions. In his bedroom, Will rummaged through his closet until he found a plain white t-shirt from his Yale days. It would be enormous on Olivia, but it would work as a nightgown. When he returned to the guest room, he heard the shower running. He placed the shirt on the bed and retreated, uncertain what to do next. In his office, he opened his laptop and typed Rebecca Taylor, New York, into a search engine. The results were useless. Too many Rebecca Taylors in a city of millions. He tried various combinations with construction companies and employment agencies, but nothing promising emerged. He was still searching when he heard a small voice. Mr. Harrison? Will turned to find Olivia standing in the doorway, swimming, in his Yale t-shirt, her hair damp and her face scrubbed clean. She looked younger now, more vulnerable, and that strange tightness returned to his chest. You can call me Will, he said, surprising himself. Will, she repeated carefully. I'm ready for bed now. He led her back to the guest room, where Duke had already made himself comfortable on the bed. Will started to scold the dog, but Olivia's face lit up. Can he stay with me? Please? I've never had a dog before. Will hesitated, then nodded. If that's what you want. Olivia climbed into the massive bed, looking tiny against the plush pillows. Duke immediately settled beside her, his protective posture unmistakable. Will stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, out of his depth. Do you need anything else? He asked. Olivia shook her head, then seemed to reconsider. Could you leave? The bathroom light on, with the door cracked open a little? Will complied, turning off the main lights but leaving the bathroom illuminated. A soft glow spilled into the bedroom, enough to keep the darkness at bay. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Will, she replied, her voice already heavy with exhaustion. Thank you for not leaving me in the park. The simple gratitude left Will speechless. He retreated to the hallway, closing the door partway. Back in his office, Will found himself unable to focus on work. Instead, he kept returning to the guest room door, checking on Olivia. Each time, he found her sleeping peacefully with Duke, standing guard. Around 3 a.m., he finally went to his own bedroom but found sleep elusive. Morning brought a disruption to Will's immaculate routine. Instead of his usual protein shake, consumed while reviewing overnight market changes, he found himself in the kitchen, wondering what children ate for breakfast. He was contemplating this question when Olivia appeared, still wearing his t-shirt, but with her jeans underneath. Her hair was a tangled mess, but her eyes were clear and alert. Good morning, she said politely. Is it okay if I have some cereal? Will realized he had no idea if he owned cereal. A search through his pantry revealed a box of some healthy, fiber-rich option that his nutritionist had recommended. Olivia wrinkled her nose at it, but accepted a bowl without complaint. At precisely 9 a.m., Jennifer called to inform him that the private investigator had arrived. Will instructed her to send the investigator up, then turned to Olivia. Someone is coming to help us find your mom, he explained. Her name is Samantha Foster, and she's very good at finding people. Olivia nodded, though Will noticed her fingers, tightening around her spoon. Will I have to go with her? The question caught Will off guard. He hadn't considered what would happen once Rebecca Taylor was located. The logical conclusion would be for Olivia to return to her mother's care, or if her mother couldn't be found, to be placed with the appropriate authorities. "No," he heard himself say. "You can stay here until we find your mom." The elevator chimed, announcing Samantha Foster's arrival. She stepped into the penthouse with the confident stride of someone comfortable in any environment, her sharp eyes taking in the unexpected scene. William Harrison, New York's most notoriously private real estate mogul, standing in his kitchen with a small girl eating cereal. "Mr. Harrison," she said, extending her hand. "Sam Foster. I understand you need someone found." Will introduced Olivia, then led Sam to his office for a private conversation. He provided what little information they had. Rebecca Taylor, last known location near Central Park 5 days ago, possibly seeking employment in construction. "This is a missing persons case," Sam pointed out. "Have you contacted the police?" "I want this handled discreetly," Will replied. "Find her first, then we'll determine next steps." Sam's eyebrow arched slightly, but she nodded. "I'll need to speak with Olivia. Children often know more than they realize." Will agreed, but added, "Be gentle. She's been through enough." The directive surprised him as much as it did Sam, whose professional mask slipped momentarily to reveal curiosity, but she recovered quickly and returned to the kitchen, where she spent the next hour talking with Olivia. Will hovered nearby, pretending to work on his tablet while listening to Olivia describe her mother's appearance, her friends, and the places they had lived. When Sam finally left, promising updates by the end of the day, Will found himself facing an unexpected dilemma. What to do with a 9-year-old girl for an entire day? "Do you have to work?" Olivia asked, as if reading his thoughts. "I can work from home today," Will replied, though his calendar was full of meetings he should attend in person. Olivia nodded, then added hesitantly, "I have homework. If you have any paper, I could..." "Do it while you work." Will led her to his home office, where he cleared a corner of his massive desk for her. He provided a notepad and pens, watching as she carefully removed a battered math workbook from her backpack. "My teacher said I should keep up with my studies, even though we move around," she explained, opening the book to a page on multiplication. "Mom checks it when she can, but sometimes she's too tired." As Olivia bent over her workbook, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration, Will found himself unable to focus on the quarterly reports awaiting his review. Instead, he watched this strange, solemn child who had disrupted his perfectly ordered life, and who, more disturbingly, made him question whether that life had been quite as perfect as he'd believed. 3 days passed with no sign of Rebecca Taylor. Each morning, Will woke expecting to find his life return to normal, only to discover Olivia sitting cross-legged on his living room floor, teaching Duke new tricks or quietly reading one of the children's books Jennifer had purchased, at Will's request. The girl had settled into his home with surprising ease, adapting to the sterile environment by creating small pockets of warmth, a colored drawing taped to the refrigerator, a collection of interesting rocks arranged on the windowsill, a makeshift tent built from dining chairs and bed sheets in the corner of the living room. Will found himself adapting as well. His rigid schedule relaxed to accommodate bedtime stories and impromptu trips to the building's rooftop garden. He delegated meetings he would normally have considered essential, authorized decisions without his usual exhaustive review, and most shockingly, turned off his phone during dinner. "You're sure about this?" Jennifer had asked when he instructed her to reschedule his flight to Chicago. "The Peterson deal..." "Can wait," Will had interrupted. "Peterson isn't going anywhere." Now, as he watched Olivia carefully measuring flour for the pancakes they were making together, his kitchen used for actual cooking for the first time since he'd moved in, Will wondered at the ease with which he'd reshuffled his priorities. "1 cup exactly," Olivia instructed seriously. "Baking is science, so you have to be precise." Will smiled despite himself. "Where did you learn that?" "Ms. Garcia," Olivia replied, referring to a teacher from one of her many schools. "She let me help with the class bake sale when Mom couldn't." She said I had a natural talent for following instructions. The elevator chimed, announcing Sam Foster's arrival. Will felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Part of him wanted answers, while another part, one he barely recognized, feared what those answers might mean for the fragile routine he and Olivia had established. "Keep measuring," he told Olivia. "I'll be right back." Sam's expression was grave as she followed Will to his office. Once the door closed behind them, she placed a folder on his desk. "I found her," she said without preamble. Will's heart rate accelerated unexpectedly. "Where?" "Manhattan General Hospital. She's been there for nearly a week." Sam opened the folder, revealing a hospital intake form. Rebecca Taylor, 38, admitted after an accident at a construction site on 47th Street. She was working as a day laborer. Will frowned. "That's unusual for a woman." "Not when you're desperate and have limited options," Sam replied, her tone neutral but pointed. According to the foreman, she had been showing up for 3 days straight, asking for any available work. He finally gave her a chance clearing debris. She hesitated before adding, "It was one of your company's sites, Mr. Harrison, the Lexington Avenue project." The revelation hit Will like a physical blow. One of his projects, a woman desperate enough to take a dangerous job, meant for men with twice her strength. And all while her daughter waited on a park bench. "How bad is it?" he asked, his voice tight. "She's stable but unconscious. The doctors induced a coma to reduce brain swelling after a head injury. They're bringing her out of it gradually, but there's no telling when she'll fully regain consciousness." Will absorb this information, his mind already calculating the legal implications. Harrison Properties maintained rigorous safety standards, but accidents happened, especially with temporary workers, who might not follow protocols. His legal team would need to... "Mr. Harrison," Sam interrupted his thoughts, "there's more." She slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a younger Rebecca Taylor, beautiful, vivacious, with the same intelligent eyes as her daughter. Will stared at it, a nebulous feeling of recognition stirring within him. "This is from her social media about 12 years ago," Sam explained. "Does she look familiar to you?" Will picked up the photo, studying it more closely. There was something about the curve of her smile, the way her head tilted slightly. "I pulled her employment history," Sam continued when Will didn't respond. "She applied to Harrison Properties 3 times over the past 9 years. Each time she was rejected during the initial screening." Another photo appeared on the desk. Rebecca looking older, more worn, but still with that same determined expression. "She also tried to contact you directly, multiple times. Your assistant has records of at least 7 calls that were blocked as persistent solicitations." Will's chest tightened as fragments of memory began to surface. A summer internship at his father's company. A brilliant young architecture student who challenged his ideas. Weekends in the Hamptons. Plans and promises discarded when opportunity called. "Becky," he whispered, the nickname falling from his lips unbidden. Sam nodded. "You knew her." It wasn't a question. Will sank into his chair, the weight of realization settling over him like a shroud. 20 years ago, he said, his voice distant. "We were involved, briefly." Sam's expression remained professional, but her eyes held a hint of judgment. "According to my research, Ms. Taylor left Yale suddenly in her junior year, around the same time you were completing your MBA there." The implication hung in the air between them. Will's mind raced through calculations he should have made years ago. "Olivia is 9, he said slowly. "Yes. And Rebecca never married." "No." Will closed his eyes, memories flooding back with painful clarity. Becky's increasingly urgent messages that he'd dismissed as emotional neediness. His father's warning about gold diggers looking to trap him. The final argument where he'd told her his career had to come first, that he wasn't ready for anything serious. How he'd blocked her number at his father's suggestion. "Does Olivia know?" he asked, opening his eyes to face Sam's steady gaze. "I don't believe so. At least, she didn't indicate any knowledge of you being her father during our conversations." Sam gathered her materials back into the folder. What you do with this? Information is your business, Mr. Harrison. My job was to find Rebecca Taylor, and I've done that. Will nodded, reaching for his checkbook. Your fee can be sent to my office, Sam interrupted, standing. Right now, I think you have more important matters to attend to. After Sam left, Will remained at his desk, staring at the closed folder. Outside his office, he could hear Olivia chatting with Duke, explaining the importance of proper pancake flipping. Technique, his daughter. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and strangely right, as if a missing piece had suddenly clicked into place. Will took a deep breath and stepped out of his office. Olivia looked up from the kitchen counter, flour dusting her cheek. Is everything okay? She asked, her perceptiveness once again catching him off guard. We found your mom, Will said gently, approaching the counter. She's at the hospital. She had an accident at work. Olivia's small body went rigid, her fingers tightening around the measuring cup she held. Is she okay? Will chose his words carefully. She's hurt, but the doctors are taking very good care of her. She's sleeping right now so her body can heal. Can I see her? Olivia's voice was small but steady. Yes, we can go right now. The pancake ingredients were abandoned as Olivia rushed to gather her things. Will watched her methodical preparation, the careful folding of her borrowed clothes, the neat arrangement of her few possessions in her backpack, and felt a surge of emotion he couldn't name. The drive to Manhattan General was silent. Olivia sat tensely beside Will in the back of the town car, her small hand occasionally seeking Duke's reassuring presence. Will had insisted on bringing the dog, despite the hospital's likely objections. Something told him Olivia would need all the comfort she could get. In the hospital lobby, Will's authoritative manner and discreet mention of a potential donation smoothed their path. Duke, wearing a hastily purchased service dog vest, was allowed to accompany them. As they rode the elevator to the intensive care unit, Will felt Olivia's hand slip into his, the first time she had initiated such contact. Outside Rebecca's room, Dr. Chen briefed them on her condition. Will listened with the focused attention he usually reserved for financial reports, absorbing every detail while keeping a protective arm around Olivia's shoulders. She suffered a significant head trauma when a piece of scaffolding collapsed, Dr. Chen explained. We induced a coma to reduce the swelling, and we've been gradually bringing her out of it. She's showing positive signs, but these things take time. When will she wake up? Olivia asked, her voice small but clear. Dr. Chen crouched to her, level. We can't know for sure, honey. It could be days or it could be weeks, but your mom is strong. All her tests show she's fighting hard. Will felt Olivia's slight frame stiffen with resolve. She's the strongest person in the world, the girl stated with absolute conviction. The doctor smiled gently. I believe you, and having you here will help her even more. He turned to Will. You can go in now. Talk to her normally. She may be able to hear you, even if she can't respond yet. Inside the room, the steady beep of monitoring equipment provided a rhythmic backdrop to Rebecca's shallow breathing. She looked smaller than Will remembered, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. The vibrant, laughing woman from his memories was hidden beneath tubes and bandages, her complexion pale against the white hospital sheets. Olivia approached the bed slowly, Duke padding silently beside her. When she reached her mother's side, she carefully placed her small hand over Rebecca's. Hi, Mom, she said softly. It's me, Liv. I waited at the park, like you said. But then Mr. Harrison found me. He has a dog named Duke, and he's been taking care of me. Her voice wavered slightly. His house is really big, but I still missed you. I did my homework every day, just like you told me to. Will stood back, feeling like an intruder on this intimate moment. He watched as Olivia continued talking to her unconscious mother, updating her on everything she'd done in the past few days, from the pancakes they'd been making to the new trick she'd taught Duke. And guess what, Mom? I even went on the roof of a really tall building. You can see the whole city from up there. When you wake up, maybe Mr. Harrison will show you too. Manikuam. Innocent suggestion pierced Will. What would happen when Rebecca woke up? How would she react to finding her daughter in the care of the man who had abandoned her 20 years ago? The man who, through neglect or ignorance, had missed 9 years of his daughter's life. Olivia turned to him suddenly. "Can I stay here with Mom in case she wakes up?" Will nodded, pulling a chair closer to the bed for her. "Of course." As Olivia settled in, Duke curling protectively at her feet, Will stepped into the hallway to speak with Dr. Chen. He arranged for a private room with an additional bed for Olivia, upgraded care and specialist consultations, throwing the full weight of his resources behind Rebecca's recovery. "Also," he added, handing Dr. Chen his business card, "I want to be notified immediately of any change in her condition, day or night." The doctor studied the card, his expression shifting slightly as he recognized the name. "You're with Harrison Properties." "I am Harrison Properties," Will corrected, his tone making it clear that expense was no object. "Ms. Taylor was injured. At one of my construction sites, I take full responsibility for her care." Dr. Chen nodded, though his eyes reflected curiosity about this powerful man's interest in an uninsured day laborer. "We'll take excellent care of her, Mr. Harrison." Will returned to the room, where Olivia had climbed onto the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb any of the medical equipment. She was showing Rebecca a drawing she'd made at Will's apartment, describing each detail as if her mother could see it. The scene, so intimate, so familial, stopped Will in his tracks. For the first time, he truly saw what his choices had cost him. Not just the years with a daughter he hadn't known existed, but the chance to build something genuine with the woman he had once claimed to love. As Olivia continued her one-sided conversation, Will pulled up another chair and sat on the opposite side of the bed. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out and gently took Rebecca's hand. "Hello, Becky," he said quietly. "It's been a long time." The next 2 weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Will converted a conference room near his office into a temporary classroom where Jennifer arranged for a private tutor to help Olivia keep up with her studies. Each morning, he would drop her off there before attending to business matters. Each afternoon, they would visit Rebecca together. The private room Will had arranged for Rebecca resembled a luxury hotel suite more than a hospital room. Fresh flowers arrived daily, along with books Olivia thought her mother might enjoy hearing. The medical staff had been surprised when Will installed a comfortable sofa that converted to a bed, making it clear that Olivia would be spending nights there. No one questioned the arrangement after Will made a substantial donation to the hospital's pediatric wing. "Your mum's brain activity is increasing," Will explained to Olivia one evening as they sat on either side of Rebecca's bed. "That's a very good sign." Olivia nodded, her fingers gently stroking her mother's arm. "I know she can hear us. Sometimes her fingers move when I talk about our favorite things." Will had noticed this too. Subtle responses when Olivia spoke, the faintest pressure when the girl held her mother's hand. The doctors remained cautiously optimistic, noting improvements in Rebecca's neural activity, but unwilling to promise a specific timeline for recovery. "Mr. Harrison," a nurse called from the doorway, "Dr. Chen would like to speak with you." In the hallway, the doctor's expression was serious but not somber. "We're seeing significant improvement. Her latest scans show the swelling has reduced substantially, and her reflexes are responding well. I believe we can begin reducing the sedation tomorrow morning." Will felt a surge of relief. What does that mean exactly? "It means we'll start the process of bringing her to consciousness. It's not like in the movies. She won't just wake up and be herself immediately. It's more of a gradual emergence, and there may be confusion, memory issues, or other cognitive effects we won't know about until she's fully awake." "But she will wake up?" Will pressed. Dr. Chen nodded. "I believe so, yes. Barring any complications, I'd expect her to regain consciousness within the next 24 to 48 hours. Will thanked the doctor, then returned to Rebecca's room with the news. Olivia's face lit up with a joy so pure it made his chest ache. "She's going to wake up!" she exclaimed, bouncing slightly in her chair. "Did you hear that, Mom? You're going to wake up soon." Will watched as Olivia leaned closer to her mother, whispering plans and promises. The girl's resilience continued to astonish him, her ability to maintain hope through circumstances that would break many adults. She'd inherited that from Rebecca, he realized. That stubborn optimism had been one of the things that had first drawn him to Becky all those years ago. Later that night, after Olivia had fallen asleep on the convertible sofa with Duke curled protectively around her, Will sat alone by Rebecca's bedside. The soft glow of the monitoring equipment cast shadows across her face, highlighting features that were at once familiar and strange. 20 years had changed them both. "I need to tell you something," he said softly, certain no one could hear. "I know about Olivia. I know she's mine." The admission, even to an unconscious woman, lifted a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "I don't know if you tried to tell me back then. I suspect you did, and I was too self-absorbed to listen." Will leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "She's extraordinary, Becky. You've done an amazing job with her, despite..." He paused, the full weight of his abandonment settling on him. "Despite everything, despite me." The steady beeping of the heart monitor punctuated the silence that followed. Will continued his one-sided conversation, speaking more honestly than he had with anyone in years. "I'm not the same person you knew. That ambitious kid who thought nothing mattered except the next deal, the next acquisition. I built everything I thought I wanted, and it turns out it's empty." He glanced over at Olivia's sleeping form. "A week with her has shown me that. She's changed everything." Will didn't notice the slight increase in Rebecca's heart rate, the flutter of movement beneath her eyelids. "I don't know what happens next. I don't have the right to ask for anything from you, but I want to be in her life, if you'll allow. I want to be the father she deserves." He stood, stretching his stiff muscles. "Anyway, you should know that your daughter is remarkable. And I'm sorry, Becky. More sorry than I can express." As he turned to check on Olivia, a faint sound made him freeze. He looked back at Rebecca, whose eyes remained closed, but whose lips had parted slightly. "Becky," he whispered, leaning closer. Her voice was barely audible, rough from disuse. "Always, and so dramatic." Will's heart stuttered. "Rebecca, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as they found his face. Recognition dawned, followed by confusion. "Will?" Her voice was a dry whisper. "Yes," he confirmed, already reaching for the call button. "Don't try to talk, you're in the hospital, you had an accident." Panic flashed across her features. "Olivia!" "She's right here," Will assured her quickly, gesturing to the sleeping child. "She's safe, she's been with me." Rebecca's eyes widened, questions forming that her weakened state wouldn't allow her to ask. The door opened as a night nurse responded to the call button. "She's awake," Will explained. The nurse immediately went to check Rebecca's vitals, then left to page Dr. Chen. Will moved to wake Olivia, but Rebecca's hand caught his wrist with surprising strength. "Wait," she managed. "How?" Understanding her question, Will explained briefly how he'd found Olivia in the park, taken her in, and subsequently discovered Rebecca in the hospital. He kept his voice low, watching her face carefully for signs of distress. "You know," she stated rather than asked, her eyes never leaving his. Will nodded. "Yes." A tear slipped down Rebecca's cheek. Before she could speak again, Dr. Chen entered, with two nurses, and Will stepped back to allow them to examine her. He used the opportunity to gently wake Olivia. "Liv," he whispered, using the nickname that had become natural over the past weeks. "Your mum's awake." Olivia was instantly alert, scrambling off the sofa and to her mother's bedside. She waited impatiently as the medical staff completed their assessment, bouncing on her toes, until Dr. Chen finally stepped aside with an understanding smile. "Mom!" Olivia's voice broke as she carefully embraced her mother, mindful of the IV, lines and monitoring equipment. Rebecca's arms encircled her daughter with tender urgency, her fingers trembling as they stroked Olivia's hair. "My baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Will retreated to the far corner of the room, giving them space for their reunion. He watched as Olivia climbed onto the bed, curling against her mother's, sighed while excitedly recounting everything that had happened. Rebecca's eyes remained fixed on her daughter, drinking in her presence, though occasionally they would flicker to Will with an expression he couldn't decipher. Dr. Chen approached Will with an update. Her cognitive responses are excellent. She's oriented to person and situation, though her time perception is still adjusting. Physically, she's weak but stable. This is very encouraging. Will nodded his thanks, relief washing over him. What happens now? We'll monitor her closely for the next 24 hours, run some additional tests, then begin physical therapy. Given her rapid response, I'm optimistic about her recovery, though it will take time. After the doctor left, Will approached the bed hesitantly. Olivia was still chattering excitedly, but Rebecca's attention had shifted to him, her gaze assessing. "You look tired," she observed, her voice stronger now, though still rough. Will smiled slightly. "You look better than you have any right to, considering." A hint of her old smile tugged at her lips, always the charmer. Olivia looked between them, confused by the undercurrent in their exchange. "Do you know each other?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Will met Rebecca's eyes, leaving the response to her. After a moment, Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand. "Mr. Harrison and I knew each other a long time ago, before you were born." "From college," Will added, careful not to overstep. Olivia's brow furrowed in thought. "Is that why you helped us? Because you knew Mom?" The innocent question demanded an honest answer. "I helped you because you needed help," Will replied. "Finding out I knew your mother was a surprise." Rebecca's eyes never left his face, searching for something only she could define. Finally, she turned back to Olivia. "Sweetheart, could you get me some water, please? The pitcher is right over there." Once Olivia had moved to the other side of the room, Rebecca spoke quietly, urgently. "She doesn't know about you being her father." "I figured that out," Will replied just as softly. "I haven't said anything." Relief flickered across Rebecca's features, followed quickly by wariness. "What do you want, Will?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "From this. From us." Her gaze was direct, unflinching. "You found out you have a daughter. You've paid for my medical care. What comes next in your plan?" Will realized with a jolt that she expected an agenda, a negotiation. The thought stung more than he'd anticipated. "There is no plan, Becky. I found a child alone in a park. I tried to help." "Everything." He shook his head. "I'm figuring it out as I go." Before she could respond, Olivia returned with the water. As Rebecca took careful sips, Will's phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer, an urgent situation with the London project, requiring his immediate attention. "I need to step out for a while," he told them, already moving toward the door. "Business emergency. Will you be okay?" Olivia nodded, clearly content now that her mother was awake. Rebecca's expression was more complex, but she nodded as well. "We'll be fine." "I'll be back later," Will promised, though he wasn't sure to whom. The next 12 hours disappeared into conference calls and crisis management. When Will finally returned to the hospital, it was nearly midnight. He expected to find Olivia asleep and Rebecca resting, but instead he found them both awake, engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation that halted abruptly when he entered. "Sorry I'm late," he said, noting the tension in the room. "Is everything all right?" Rebecca nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "Olivia was just telling me more about your time together." Something in her tone put Will on alert. He glanced at Olivia, who was watching him with wide, solemn eyes. "Mom says you're my dad," she said directly, in that forthright way that continually caught him off guard. Will froze, unprepared for this moment, despite knowing it was inevitable. He looked to Rebecca, who met his gaze steadily. "She deserved to know," Rebecca said simply. "I've never lied to her." The implication was clear. Unlike you, who lived in denial. Will moved slowly to sit in the chair beside Olivia. "Yes," he confirmed, his voice steadier than he felt. "I am your father, But I didn't know that until very recently. Mom said you didn't know about me, Olivia stated, studying his face with disconcerting intensity. She said you might have, if things had been different. The diplomatic phrasing told Will that Rebecca had been generous in her explanation, sparing him the worst of the truth. He felt a surge of gratitude alongside his shame. Your mother is right, he said carefully. There are many things I would have done differently if I had known, the most important being that I would have wanted to know you from the very beginning. Olivia considered this, her expression serious. But now you do know. So what happens? It was the same question Rebecca had asked, but from Olivia's lips it carried a different weight, the straightforward curiosity of a child who needed concrete answers to navigate her world. That depends on what you and your mother want, Will replied honestly. I would like to be part of your life if you'll let me, but I understand that this is all very sudden, and there's a lot we need to figure out. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. Mom said we need to take it slow, one step at a time. Will glanced at Rebecca, whose face revealed nothing of her own feelings on the matter. Your mother is very wise. A nurse appeared in the doorway, reminding them of the late hour and suggesting that Rebecca needed rest. Will stood, preparing to take Olivia back to his apartment for the night, but the girl looked uncertainly between her parents. Can I stay here? She asked. With Mom? Of course, Will assured her quickly. Duke and I will go home and come back in the morning. As he gathered Duke's leash, Will felt Rebecca's eyes on him. When he turned to say goodnight, she spoke quietly. Thank you for taking care of her. The simple acknowledgement meant more than she could know. She's amazing, Becky. You've done an incredible job. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. Tomorrow we should talk about everything. Will nodded, understanding the conversation that lay ahead would be one of the most important of his life. As he left the hospital with Duke, his mind raced, with all the things he needed to say, all the apologies he needed to make, all the questions he needed to ask. For the first time in decades, William Harrison was entering a negotiation with no leverage, no upper hand, and everything that mattered hanging in the balance. The conversation Will had anticipated with equal parts dread and necessity didn't happen the next day or the day after. Rebecca's recovery became the priority as she began physical therapy and additional cognitive assessments. Olivia remained constantly at her side, a vigilant guardian determined to assist in every aspect of her mother's healing. Will found himself in an unexpected role, facilitator and observer, arranging for the best specialists, ensuring Rebecca's eventual discharge would be seamless, all while giving mother and daughter the space they clearly needed. He maintained a careful distance, visiting daily but never staying long, conscious of the delicate balance they were all trying to navigate. Week after Rebecca regained consciousness, Dr. Chen confirmed she was ready for discharge, though she would need continued outpatient therapy and monitoring. Where will you go? Will asked, as he helped Rebecca pack the few personal items that had accumulated in her hospital room. Olivia was down the hall with a nurse who had taken a special liking to her, getting a tour of the pediatric ward. Rebecca folded a sweater with deliberate care. I've been giving that a lot of thought. You could stay with me, Will offered, then quickly added, in the guest house it's completely separate from the main residence. You'd have privacy, but Olivia could move between both places easily. Rebecca gave him a measuring look. You have a guest house in Manhattan? No, Will admitted. At my place in Connecticut. It's about an hour outside the city. Seeing her hesitation, he continued, it would just be temporary until you're fully recovered and we figured out everything else. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, fatigue evident in the slump of her shoulders. 20 years ago, I would have laughed at the idea of living in your guest house. Now I'm considering it because I literally have nowhere else to go. The bitterness in her voice was tempered with resignation. Our apartment is gone. I couldn't make the rent while I was in here. My things are probably already on the curb. Will felt the weight of her situation, a situation that existed in part because of choices he had made 2 decades earlier. I can have someone retrieve your belongings today. That's not the point, Will. Rebecca looked up at him, eyes sharp despite her exhaustion. The point is that I've spent 9 years fighting to give Olivia stability, and now I'm right back where I started, dependent on someone else's charity. It's not charity, Becky. She's my daughter too. A fact you discovered 3 weeks ago, Rebecca reminded him. Don't pretend this is about some long-standing paternal obligation. The accusation stung, but Will couldn't deny its truth. You're right. I can't claim that, but it doesn't change the fact that I want to help, both of you. He sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. The guest house is yours for as long as you need it. No strings, no expectations. Just a safe place to recover and figure out your next steps. Rebecca studied him, searching for the ambitious, calculating young man she had once known. What she found instead was something she hadn't expected: uncertainty, genuine concern, and a vulnerability that the old Will would have considered weakness. We need to talk about the past, she said finally. About what happened. About the choices we both made. Will nodded. I know. And we need to discuss Olivia, how to tell her the full truth, what kind of relationship you'll have with her, what this means for her future. Absolutely, Will agreed. Everything at your pace. On your terms. Rebecca's laugh held little humor. My terms, that's a first. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Fine, the guest house. But I pay rent once I'm working again, and this is strictly a temporary arrangement. Agreed, Will said, relief evident in his voice. Though the rent is negotiable. A ghost of a smile touched Rebecca's lips. Always the businessman. The discharge process went smoothly, with Will's driver transporting them to his Connecticut estate. Rebecca had been prepared for luxury, but the reality of Will's country home still took her breath away. 15 acres of manicured grounds, surrounding a restored colonial mansion that managed to be both imposing and welcoming. You live here alone? She asked as they drove up the winding driveway. Most weekends, Will replied. I've been staying in the city during the week, but I thought it might be better for your recovery to be away from the noise and crowds. The guest house proved to be a charming 3-bedroom cottage with its own garden, positioned at a discreet distance from the main house. While modest by comparison, it was still more spacious and elegant than any place Rebecca had lived in the past decade. Olivia ran from room to room, exclaiming over each discovery with delight that made both parents smile. Mom, there's a window, seat in my room, and Duke can visit whenever he wants. Rebecca watched her daughter's excitement with a mixture of happiness and trepidation. She's going to get used to this, she murmured to Will. What happens when we leave? Will had no answer that wouldn't sound like pressure, so he simply offered to help unpack the belongings his assistant had retrieved from their apartment. The collection was heartbreakingly small. Some clothes, a few books, Olivia's school supplies, and a box of photographs that Rebecca handled with particular care. That evening, after Olivia had fallen asleep in her new room, Rebecca and Will sat on the cottage's back porch, the space between them filled with 2 decades of unspoken words. I tried to tell you, Rebecca finally said, breaking the silence, when I found out I was pregnant. Will nodded, his eyes fixed on the darkened garden. Sam, the investigator, found records of the calls, and letters apparently. 17 letters, Rebecca confirmed, all returned unopened. After a while I got the message. The weight of her words settled over Will like a physical burden. My father's doing, most likely. He monitored my communications closely in those days. Anything that might distract me from the business was eliminated. That's convenient, Rebecca said, her tone making it clear she didn't entirely believe him. Blame the deceased parent. Will turned to face her directly. I'm not making excuses, Becky. Whether it was my father or my assistant or my own self-absorption, doesn't matter. The fact is, I failed you, both of you. Nothing can change that. The raw honesty in his voice caught Rebecca off guard. The Will she had known would have crafted a careful defense, shifted blame, negotiated a favorable settlement. This man seemed almost a stranger, one who bore his guilt openly and made no attempt to minimize it. What do you want now, Will? She asked, echoing her question from the hospital. Really? No business talk, no lawyer-approved answers, just the truth. Will considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I want to know my daughter," he finally said. "I want to be part of her life, not just financially, but really present. I want to make up for lost time, though I know that's impossible." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And I'd like the chance to show you that I'm not the same person who hurt you." Rebecca studied him, years of hard-earned caution, warring with the evidence before her eyes. Olivia is smart, perceptive, and has had enough disappointment in her life. If you're going to be in her life, it has to be all in. No disappearing when things get difficult or when your business needs attention. "I understand," Will said solemnly. "Do you?" Rebecca challenged. "Because being a parent isn't like running a company. You can't delegate the hard parts. You can't optimize for efficiency. It's messy and emotional and often thankless." Will smiled slightly. "I've learned that much in the past few weeks. She makes me answer why at least 50 times a day." A reluctant smile tugged at Rebecca's lips. "That's actually down from her peak. It was about 100 when she was 4. The shared moment of parental understanding hung between them, a small bridge across the chasm of years. As it faded, Rebecca's expression grew serious again. "There's something else you should know," she said. "Something I've never told Olivia." Will tensed, bracing for another revelation. "I applied to work at Harrison Properties 3 times. Rebecca's voice was steady but tinged with old hurt. "Each time using my maiden name, hoping to at least get an interview, thinking maybe if I could just see you face to face." She shook her head. "I was rejected every time, unqualified, despite having completed my architecture degree while raising a child alone." The revelation landed like a physical blow. "I had no idea." "I know. Your HR department was very efficient at screening out candidates without the right pedigree." There was no accusation in her tone, just stated fact. "The irony is, I ended up working on your buildings anyway, just not as an architect. The day I was injured, I was clearing debris at the Lexington Avenue site because they were paying cash, and I needed to make rent." Will closed his eyes, the full circle of his culpability complete. His company's hiring practices, which he had, proudly touted as selective and excellence-focused, had directly contributed to Rebecca's desperate situation. And those same practices had created unsafe conditions that nearly cost Olivia her mother. "I don't know how to make this right," he admitted, opening his eyes to meet her gaze, "but I want to try." Rebecca considered him for a long moment. "Start by listening," she finally said. "To me, to Olivia, who learn who we are now, not who you think we should be or who we were 20 years ago." Will nodded, understanding this was both instruction and test. "I can do that." "And one more thing," Rebecca added. "Whatever happens between us, whether we end up as co-parents who barely tolerate each other or something else entirely, it has to be real. No corporate takeovers, no strategic alliances, no calculated risk management, just authenticity." "I'm not sure I remember how to do that," Will admitted. Rebecca's smile was small but genuine. "That's the most honest thing you've said yet." The weeks that followed established a cautious routine. Rebecca focused on her recovery, attending physical therapy sessions and gradually regaining her strength. Will restructured his work schedule to spend more time in Connecticut, often bringing his laptop to the garden where he could work while watching Olivia play with Duke. Olivia thrived in the new environment, though she remained vigilant about her mother's well-being. Will observed how she would check on Rebecca throughout the day, bringing her water or adjusting her pillows with a competence that spoke of long practice caring for others despite her young age. One evening, as Will helped Olivia with her math, homework at the kitchen table in the main house, she looked up at him with that direct gaze that never failed to unsettle him. "Are you and Mom going to get married?" she asked bluntly. Will nearly dropped the pencil he was holding. "That's complicated, Liv. Why?" "You're my dad, she's my mom. In books, that's what happens next." Will chose his words carefully. "Real life isn't always like books. Your mom and I have a lot of history to work through." Olivia considered this with her usual seriousness. "You hurt her feelings a long time ago, didn't you?" The simple assessment made Will wince. "Yes, I did, very badly." But you're sorry now? Extremely sorry, Will confirmed. Olivia nodded, returning to her multiplication problems. Mom says, everyone deserves a second chance if they're truly sorry, but they have to prove it with actions, not just words. Will smiled despite himself. Your mom is very wise. I know, Olivia agreed matter-of-factly. That's why I think you should try really hard to make her happy. She deserves to be happy. The child's straightforward compassion touched something deep in Will. Yes, she does. As Rebecca grew stronger, she began spending more time in the main house, joining them for meals and participating in the evening activities that had become their tradition, board games, movie nights, or simply reading together, in the large library that had been Will's mother's pride and joy. Will watched as Rebecca gradually lowered her guard, allowing glimpses of the vibrant, passionate woman he had known in his youth. Her laugh came more frequently, her eyes regained their spark, and her natural intelligence reasserted itself in lively debates over dinner. One Sunday morning, Will found Rebecca in the garden, sketching the house with practiced strokes. He approached quietly, not wanting to disturb her concentration. "You still draw," he observed when she looked up. Rebecca nodded, closing her sketchbook partially. "I never stopped. It keeps me sane." Will gestured to the book. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Rebecca handed him the sketchbook. Will flipped through pages of architectural drawings, landscapes, and portraits, many of Olivia at different ages, capturing her growth from toddler to the thoughtful 9-year-old they now knew. "These are extraordinary, Becky," he said, genuinely impressed. "You always were talented, but this—" He paused at a detailed rendering of a housing complex with innovative community spaces. "What's this project?" Rebecca took the book back, her fingers lingering on the drawing. "Just something I work on. Sometimes, affordable housing with built-in childcare and community resources." She shrugged, attempting to downplay her passion. "A pipe dream." Will studied her face, seeing the spark that had always drawn him to her. "It doesn't have to be." "What do you mean?" "Harrison Properties has a foundation for community development projects. This concept could be exactly what we're looking for in the East Harlem Revitalization Zone." Rebecca's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Is this charity, Will? Because I told you—" "It's business," he interrupted. "Good business. The foundation needs innovative projects with social impact. Your design has both." He held her gaze steadily. "The fact that you created it is relevant only because I know the quality of your work." Rebecca studied him, searching for signs of manipulation or pity. Finding none, she slowly nodded. "I'd need to develop it further." "Of course. Take whatever time you need. The Foundation's board meets quarterly. The next review is in 2 months. As he turned to leave, Rebecca called after him. "Will?" He looked back. "Thank you for not pretending you didn't see my sketch, for not walking by." The simple acknowledgement carried layers of meaning they both understood. 20 years ago, he had walked by, choosing ambition over connection, career over love. This time he had stopped to see her, truly see her. It was a small moment, but as Will continued into the house, he felt something shift between them, a subtle recalibration of possibilities. Autumn gave way to winter, painting the Connecticut estate in crystalline white. The temporary arrangement stretched into months as Rebecca's housing project evolved from sketch to comprehensive proposal, with Will's encouragement. Olivia settled into a nearby private school, thriving academically and making friends for the first time in her nomadic life. The Harrison Foundation Board unanimously approved Rebecca's affordable housing concept, allocated funding, and appointed her as lead architect. The project, named Olivia Gardens, would transform an abandoned lot in East Harlem into a vibrant community space with subsidized apartments, a childcare center, and resources for single parents. "They loved it," Will announced, entering the guest house without knocking, a sign of their evolving comfort with each other. "Construction begins in spring." Rebecca looked up from her laptop, disbelief warring with hope on her face. "Seriously, they approved the full proposal?" "Every element," Will confirmed, grinning as he handed her the official letter. "Including—" the rooftop garden, and the Career Development Center. They were particularly impressed by the sustainable energy features. Rebecca read through the document, her hands trembling slightly. This is really happening. It is. Will sat across from her at the small kitchen table. And they want you to oversee the entire project. Full creative control, competitive salary, benefits package. He paused, watching her reaction carefully. You'd be working for the foundation, not Harrison Properties directly. Your success or failure would be entirely your own. Rebecca looked up, understanding his careful distinction. No special treatment? None, Will promised. Though I can't guarantee some board members weren't influenced by the fact that the project's architect happens to be exceptionally talented. A smile spread across Rebecca's face, unreserved, joyful, perhaps the first truly unguarded expression she had shown him since their reunion. I need to tell Olivia. She helped with the community space design. She's still at school, Willie reminded her. Chess club until 5. Right. Rebecca set down the letter, suddenly aware of their solitude. Such moments had become increasingly frequent, but remained charged with unspoken possibility. Well, thank you for presenting it to the board, for believing in the project. The project sells itself, Will replied honestly. I just opened the door. Something in his tone made Rebecca study him more closely. You've changed. Will raised an eyebrow. For better or worse? Both, maybe. Rebecca stood, moving to the kitchen window that overlooked the snow-covered garden. The old Will would have taken credit for my success, would have seen it as a personal victory. This Will, she turned to face him. This Will seems content to witness rather than control. The observation was astute, touching on a transformation Will himself had only begun to recognize. Olivia's influence, I suspect. She's teaching me that not everything needs to be managed. Rebecca smiled at the mention of their daughter. She has that effect on people. She gets it from you, Will said quietly. That ability to see beyond the surface, to understand what matters. The compliment hung in the air between them, sincere in a way their earlier interactions had rarely been. Rebecca's expression softened, the wariness that had become her default around Will fading slightly. I've been thinking, Will continued, moving to stand near her at the window, about what happens next. Rebecca tensed visibly. What do you mean? Your project will keep you in New York for at least 2 years. Olivia is settled at her school. The commute from Connecticut would be brutal once construction begins. He hesitated, then pressed on. I own a brownstone in the Upper West Side. 4 bedrooms, garden level, completely separate entrance. I rarely use it. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Are you offering us another guest house? I'm offering you a home, Will corrected, in your name, not a loan, not a temporary arrangement. Yours. The magnitude of the offer left Rebecca speechless. When she finally found her voice, it was thick with suspicion. Why would you do that? Will met her gaze directly. Because you deserve security. Because Olivia deserves stability. Because I have more than I could ever need, and using some of it to ensure my daughter never has to sleep on a park bench again seems like the bare minimum of decency. It's too much, Rebecca protested. I can't accept that. You can, Will countered. Consider it 9 years of back child support if that makes it easier. Rebecca crossed her arms defensively. Is that what this is? You paying off your obligation? No, Will said firmly. This is me acknowledging that I can't change the past, but I can help secure your future, both of yours. No strings, no expectations, no control, just peace of mind. Rebecca turned away, conflict evident in the tight line of her shoulders. I've spent so long fighting to make it on, my own, to prove I didn't need you or anyone else. I know, Will said gently, and you've succeeded. This isn't about need, Becky. It's about what you deserve. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, Rebecca spoke without turning. I'll think about it. Will nodded, accepting that this was the most she could offer for now. Take all the time you need. That evening, after Olivia had gone to bed, Will sat alone in his study, reviewing proposals for the London expansion. The work that had once consumed him now felt secondary, a necessary obligation rather than his life's purpose. He found his thoughts continually drifting to the cottage across the grounds, to the two people who had irrevocably changed his understanding of what mattered. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his musings. Rebecca stood in the doorway, wrapped in a thick cardigan against the winter chill. "May I come in?" she asked. "Will set aside his work immediately." "Of course." Rebecca entered the study, her gaze taking in the space that so perfectly reflected its owner. Meticulously organized, elegantly understated, yet with unexpected touches of warmth in the well-worn leather chairs and shelf of first edition novels. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said, settling into one of the chairs across from his desk. Will waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. "I can't accept the brownstone," she stated finally. Will nodded, disappointed but not surprised. "I understand. But," Rebecca continued, "I would consider a different arrangement." "What did you have in mind?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "A legitimate rental agreement, market rate but with consideration for my new salary. A proper lease that I sign, with all the legal protections that entails." Will leaned forward, intrigued. "That could work. And one more condition," Rebecca added, her voice softening slightly, "that you be nearby for Olivia's sake." The request, with its careful qualification, hovered between them, laden with meaning. Will studied her face, searching for the deeper invitation he sensed beneath her words. "For Olivia's sake," he repeated carefully. "Only that?" Rebecca met his gaze, a vulnerability in her eyes that she had kept hidden for months. "No, not only that." The admission shifted something fundamental between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had been willing to voice until now. "I've missed you, Becky," Will said quietly. "Not just in the past few months, but for 20 years. I just didn't allow myself to recognize it until now." Rebecca's smile was tentative but genuine. "The man I knew 20 years ago would never have admitted that." "The man I was 20 years, Dago was an idiot," Will replied with surprising frankness. "Ambitious, yes. Successful by certain metrics, absolutely, but completely blind to what actually matters." "And what matters now?" Rebecca asked, the question gentle but pointed. Will didn't hesitate. "Family, connection, using my resources for something beyond accumulation. Creating, rather than just acquiring." He paused, then added simply, "You, Olivia. This second chance, I don't deserve but desperately want to honor." Rebecca stood, moving to the window that overlooked the snow-covered gardens. "I was so angry with you for so long," she admitted. "It defined me in ways I didn't even recognize. Being a single mother became my identity, my battle, my proof that I didn't need you." Will joined her at the window, maintaining a respectful distance. "You didn't need me. You proved that beyond any doubt. You raised an extraordinary child, entirely on your own." "But that's just it," Rebecca said, turning to face him. "I did it, I proved it, and now—" She gestured vaguely. "Now I'm wondering what it would be like to choose something different, not because I need it, but because I want it." The distinction was crucial, a shift from necessity to desire, from survival to possibility. Will understood the significance of what she was offering. "What do you want, Becky?" he asked softly. Rebecca took a deep breath. "I want to give Olivia the family she deserves. I want to build something meaningful with my architecture. I want security without sacrificing independence." She paused, then added with quiet certainty, "And I want to see if there's still something between us worth exploring, not as the people we were, but as the people we've become." Will felt something expand in his chest. Hope, possibility, a future he hadn't dared imagine. "I want those things too." "It won't be easy," Rebecca warned. "We have history, complicated, painful history." "I know," Will acknowledged, "but we also have Olivia, and time, and perhaps a wisdom we didn't have before." Rebecca's smile widened, becoming more confident. "Did William Harrison just suggest that wisdom might be more valuable than efficiency? Now I know you've changed." Will laughed, the sound relaxed and genuine. Dramatic transformation, remember? Olivia's assessment, not mine. Rebecca's expression grew serious again. We take it slow, one day at a time. No grand gestures, no rushing ahead. Agreed, Will said solemnly, though I reserve the right to occasionally surprise you, within reasonable boundaries. Defined by whom? Rebecca challenged, a hint of their old banter returning. By you, Will replied simply, always by you. The answer seemed to satisfy her. As they stood together at the window, watching snowflakes drift in the soft glow of the exterior lights, Will felt a peace he had never known in his meticulously constructed life. Not the austere silence of his penthouse, but a living quiet filled with possibility. Spring arrived with a gentle persistence that mirrored the changes in their unconventional family. Rebecca moved into the brownstone Will had offered, though under the rental terms she had insisted upon. Will took an apartment 2 blocks away, close enough for daily involvement in Olivia's life, yet respectful of the boundaries Rebecca had established. Olivia Gardens broke ground in April, with Olivia herself ceremonially turning the first shovel of dirt while cameras captured the moment for local news. Rebecca stood proudly beside her daughter, her professional confidence growing as contractors and city officials deferred to her expertise. Will remained deliberately in the background, allowing mother and daughter their well-deserved spotlight. Their relationship evolved with careful deliberation, dinners together as a family, then occasional evenings just the two of them after Olivia went to sleep. Old wounds were acknowledged, discussed, and gradually began to heal. New connections formed, based not on the passionate but unstable attraction of their youth, but on mutual respect and shared purpose. One evening in early June, Will suggested a walk through Central Park after dinner. Rebecca agreed, curious about his unusually specific request. As they strolled along familiar paths in the fading light, Will guided them toward Bethesda Terrace. "Why here?" Rebecca asked as they approached the fountain. Will gestured to a particular bench, the one where he had found Olivia 9 months earlier. "This is where it began. Our second chance." Understanding dawned in Rebecca's eyes. "Where you found her." "Where she found me," Will corrected. "I was lost long before that night, Becky. Lost in a life that looked successful from the outside but was completely hollow." He led her to the bench, where they sat together in the gentle summer evening. From his pocket, Will withdrew a small, velvet box. Rebecca began, a warning in her voice. "It's not what you think," he assured her, opening the box to reveal not a ring, but a key. "This is for the cottage in Connecticut. I've transferred ownership to Olivia, with you as trustee until she's 21. It's her legacy, her security. No matter what happens between us, she'll always have a home." Rebecca stared at the key, then at Will, tears gathering in her eyes. "That's perfect, thank you." Will closed the box, returning it to his pocket. "The ring comes later when we're both ready, if we're ever ready. No timelines, no pressure." Rebecca laughed softly, brushing away tears. "That might be the most romantic non-proposal I've ever received." "I'm learning," Will said with a smile. "Slowly, but I'm learning." As darkness settled over the park, they remained on the bench where their story had restarted, not as the ambitious young man and the brilliant architecture student they had once been, but as the people life had shaped them into: a father, discovering the joy of family, a mother embracing new possibilities, and somewhere between them, the foundation of something built to last. In the penthouse that no longer felt like home, Duke lay beside a sleeping Olivia, who had insisted on one more story, until she had finally drifted off. On the refrigerator door, a child's drawing showed 3 figures and a dog, standing before a house with impossible proportions but unmistakable warmth. Across the top, in careful 9-year-old handwriting, were the words, "My family,